Hi everybody, how you doing? This Tuesday I will cast the most consequential vote in my lifetime till now. This vote will have greater impact on the upcoming presidential election than any vote I have cast in the past, as well as the vote I will cast in November. The reason is that I live in the state of New Jersey, where Democrats always win in presidential elections. So what makes the vote I am casting now so important for November? Until recently, I stayed out of primary politics. I'm a staunch Democrat who, since the time of Richard Nixon, equated the Republican Party with pure evil. And while I have not always agreed with every platform of the Democratic Party, nor the positions, actions, and behavior of its members, it has always been for me the only defense that we as a people have against the horrible, predatory practices of the worst, broken, economically dictatorial capitalism that ended the fair competition of good capitalism since the 1980s under Ronald Reagan, as well as the stolen election of 2000 that enabled the greatest horror on American soil to occur, followed by the greatest recession since the Great Depression. My aim has been to stop Republicans from getting elected whatever it takes. When this election between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton got started, I stayed out of it with the attitude that I will support whomever the Democrats felt was the best candidate. I saw good on both candidates, both having a history I greatly admired and respected, and still do. I also saw a lot of weaknesses in both. Hillary talked little about policy and a lot about how well her campaign was doing, plus avoided the media for as long as possible. Bernie sounded like a tape recorder playing the same ideological lines over and over. However, I saw a dramatic and welcome improvement in both candidates as campaigning tested them and made them more real in talking to the people. I felt confident that we would have a good candidate to vote for in the fall. When Hillary won the Ohio primary while Donald Trump lost it, I began to feel, at least from a strategic standpoint, that she would be the better candidate since Bernie lost in Ohio. Ohio is the most crucial state in presidential elections. I know it seems unfair, but that is the system we now have, and I am a staunch pragmatist, believing whatever gets the correct job done, do what it takes. Of course, winning a primary among one's party members and winning an election among all voters can be very different. So when a couple weeks ago polls showed Clinton's lead over Trump well within the margin of error, but Bernie Sanders' lead over Trump as high as 10 points, it became extremely clear to me that he needs to be the one we nominate to avoid any chance of Trump getting near the White House. Simply pragmatic. And so I made the dramatic decision to vote for Bernie Sanders. It makes more than clear sense that if Bernie is showing a much huger chance of defeating Trump in the fall based on polling than Hillary, that anyone who wants to be sure of defeating Trump and every evil the Republican Party represents must make sure Bernie gets the nomination. It is not about who would make a better president. It is about defeating Trump, defeating bullying, defeating mean-spirited, defeating holding back, or even turning back the progress of humanity and history, whoever it takes to do that. What I frankly don't understand is why more and more Democrats in the quote-unquote high places are tightening their nervous grip around Hillary to make sure that she gets the nomination, because despite the clear indication that the polling is giving, they really don't believe or trust the numbers. And this brings me to a real underlying yet very essential and very troubling thing going on. The huge disconnect between ordinary, everyday people like me and people who are in the news and media every day, who are completely disconnected from what is going on in the hearts and minds of people everywhere. After seeing the news filled with Hillary and many of the politicians and famous people I have long admired endorsing Hillary, I went on a trip. I saw 3 road signs for Trump and 3 for Bernie Sanders. I saw 1 road sign with Hillary's name. I had to drive up close to see what it said because it had her colors and design on it, but when you look more closely, it said Hillary for prison. Based on that experience, I got really worried about Hillary's chances. Even on my feeds and in the people around me, Bernie's extremely staunch supporters have hugely outshouted the feeble endorsements of Hillary. It is like watching TV and living life are in 2 different universes. Yet the fake one on the 2-dimensional screen seems to be like the one that will determine who gets the nomination. Up until the past month, I've had nothing but undying support for the Democratic Party, always avoiding the George W. Bush gaffe that all Republicans now follow with the same stupidity of the mispronounced, quote, Democrat Party, unquote, no matter how many of their members fell short, always defending them as defenders of the people, of freedom from economic tyranny, of the insurance that we all have a share in the good life that America represents to so many people, urging the purists on the far left with their blinding narrowness never to allow America to be yanked backward by truly selfish and truly evil people. But now the party itself has betrayed its very value of fairness, cooperation, and unity by its manipulation of results in places like Nevada and its strong-arming, along with the media and many celebrities, of the nomination process, something that, out of character with its name, betrays and ignores the cries of the people. Although this is not the primary reason I have decided to vote for Bernie Sanders on Tuesday and urge you to do so, having undergone the stolen presidential election in Florida in 2000, I am more than sensitive to when people with political and governing power abuse their power to steal the results of a fair election in an unfair way so as to skew the results. Don't get me wrong, I have always loved and still love Hillary Clinton, and I believe she understands the political and governing process in a less ideological way than Bernie Sanders that enables her to accomplish more in governing along with many adversaries. Her governing and negotiating skills are more realistic. Of course, I would much prefer a country led by people who believe in real democracy, both politically and economically, as Bernie Sanders does. But I also worry that Bernie as president will end up in a stalemate with the Republicans that will create even more deadlock than the far more willing to compromise President Obama had to suffer as his initiatives toward Congress always got squashed. But this isn't the presidency. This is the election. And it's not about how I feel. It's about how the polling shows most Americans are feeling. And looking around on my own right here on the ground, it is clear that the voters have a great fire in their attitude and are demanding major change, something they don't see occurring with Hillary Clinton. For this reason, I strongly urge all of you listening to make the smart decision and vote for Bernie Sanders. If you are a superdelegate, I urge you to vote for Sanders. It is about uniting and defeating Donald Trump. I believe all Clinton supporters would support a Sanders candidacy once it happens, but sadly, and much to my dismay, there are many Sanders supporters who would not extend the same support to candidate Clinton. It's not what I want at all, but it is the ugly reality we must deal with if we are to save this country from the apocalypse that is threatened by Donald Trump right around the corner. It is like the disastrous and egomaniacal George W. Bush on steroids, amphetamines, and alcohol all rolled into one president. Ugh! There is momentum desperately crying for change, like many tidal waves running into each other and creating chaos right now. Those lucky enough to cling to the old ivory tower of established politics and economics will soon not be as lucky, as these tide waters of human frustration, anger, and enthusiasm engulf them, including the Democrats who cling to what was once the progressive but now is the old order, and the so-called mainstream media personnel who, though they accurately report the cataclysm because they love crisis, give greater voice to the shrinking, though still powerful establishment, and a much quieter voice to the ones who are really the loudest ones and the most numerous. Now don't be fooled by Trump. He is the total opposite of Bernie Sanders. He is by no means an outsider. His address is Main Street corporate America. His towering pieces of ugly architecture that impress those with no aesthetic sentiment, that ruin the culture and character of a New York that Ed Koch had already saved, are the epitome of the Republican squashing of the people and of what is truly human. And his condescending attitude that helped shape the worst form of TV, reality TV, is by no means connected to the real daily struggles and integrity of the millions of Americans living in the real world who are the victims of the looting of their rights and their wealth by the corporate elite, of which Donald Trump is right one among them. Don't be fooled. His supporters, as is the case in most elections, are totally deceived by him, just as struggling working class people have voted against their own best interests for decades. This is not a game. This is not a reality show. And yes, Donald Trump wants to run America like a business, but not an honest, fair business that takes care of its employees, but like the many businesses he has run into the ground. Donald Trump is no Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump, the total corporate insider, has not a shred of interest in anyone who has been pushed among the millions of Americans to the outside. We need to stop him by voting for Bernie Sanders this Tuesday, who really stands with the outsiders, the marginalized, the disenfranchised, who pinpoints the real enemy, which has never been government which has been the only ally of the people, not out for profit, but to protect the people, government of the people, government by the people, and government for the people. the benign entity which George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, and their contemporaries gave shape to, and which Abraham Lincoln invoked at America's worst crisis. Government is not the problem. The greed of the corporate free market capitalists who have undone the helpful regulations that enable true, fair, competitive capitalism, who have overrun our government in the Republican Party, is your biggest enemy and a much bigger threat to our future than even terrorists. The most patriotic thing to do is run them out of town by standing with Bernie until the convention so that a fair debate on a progressive democratic future can be held, and then run like hell to support the Democratic nominee, whoever he or she is, to trounce Trump with a huge landslide. One more thing. Hillary Clinton is nothing like the horrible image of her media is painting based on Republican and corporate America-fed distortions of and lies about who she is. She's a terrific individual, a person with great conscientious passion to help the everyday people of the country and the marginalized, which is now close to 98% of Americans, even the ones who fall for the Trump lies and inconsistencies from one moment to the next. And she would not only make a terrific president, but one who can accomplish so much more at this very trying time in human history, who can, as president, save our planet and all of us. But unfortunately, the truth of talent and hope has been successfully quashed by the very powerful, so that Hillary Clinton's chances of beating Trump in his upcoming election are dimming fast day by day, because too many people are easily bought by these distortions. And many of the things Bernie Sanders and his followers have said about Hillary are equally untrue, and very unhelpful to our chances to win a progressive agenda. Fortunately, Bernie has reined them in and explained he just wants a fair chance to make his case for his nomination, as well as help determine the party platform going forward. However, the enthusiasm and support he has generated also forces us to work to help him gain the nomination, because he clearly has a much better shot against Trump as things stand now. But please don't mistake my vote and my strong plea for you to vote for him as a condemnation of Hillary, for my positive opinion of this stellar individual that she is will never change. Just go now and vote for Bernie, so we can beat the huge evil that is about to destroy this planet if we get caught up in these much lesser squabbles. Please do it and be effective. Life is never won in theory or point of view. It is won by strategy. Please use it Tuesday.